be a conversation. So that's what I'm about. And I am thrilled, really thrilled to have my new friend here because, we can network. We have to embrace all the networking we can do. So Marla and I met maybe 2 weeks ago and we hit it off and we're both of an age. Is that a pretty way to put it? Both of an age.
Sure.
And I'm just going to introduce Marla very briefly here as a sales communication expert. Now, I'm also in sales. For 40 years, I've been in sales. And she said, it's all a conversation. And the other thing that we agreed on was that every one of us, you and me and Marla and every one of you out there, we're all in sales, selling ourselves. So we're going to be talking around the sales. But remember, if you don't think you're a salesperson, stop and think about how you sell yourself as well. That's where we're going to kind of go. Marla says, my Scrappy can support your Scrappy. And I love that. That's why I immediately felt a bond, because I like foolishness and she didn't mind that I went foolish. She says she doesn't use the Scrappy, but I think it fits for her and I together. And I had it in here in the notes, Marla. I just want you to introduce yourself very briefly and tell us about your very first business, washing.
Yes, okay.
So Marla, who is Marla? Who is Marla?
Sure. I'm Marla Koupal, and I've been in sales for a few centuries, no, a few decades. A few decades. Let's get that right.
Where are you living? Where are you living, Marla?
I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Okay, and I'm in Canada.
Yeah.
Toronto. Yeah.
And so I just grew up in a family that I feel I was very privileged. You don't know this until later, but where my grandfather was a John Deere implement dealer, farmer, rancher. As a young kid, I'd get to walk the streets with him as he's talking to the farmers and stuff. And he teaches me about people. He sees somebody he says, see that farmer over there where he cut the toes out of his shoes? He doesn't want to get bunion surgery. He's not poor. He's worth this many million. Now, when you're 4 and 5, you don't know how to absorb all of that, but it comes back later. I got to tell you, that's a story I tell often.
Wow.
I got to sit on the parts counter with all the farmers, and my mom was, helping them order parts. Grandpa would be there. Sometimes I just see these people, they were kind of crusty, but I saw the twinkle in their eye.
Yes.
And I knew they were teasing. So I could see that. And so men in general just didn't off-put me because I saw them as crusty with a marshmallow inside. And then
Say that one more time. You saw them as what?
As crust. If I saw them as crusty, but I saw the twinkle, I knew they had a marshmallow inside.
I love that. These are the little gems that we can hang on to. So if I jump in there once in a while and I hear that gem, I want to get it repeated, because that's how you and I from that story, that's how we collect our wisdom of the world. Right. And so I just know that not necessarily a lot of salespeople listening in today, but I really want to drive home that even if you think you're not in sales, this is how we sell ourselves, our presence in the world. But anyhow, sorry to interrupt you, but I love that story, and I love the crusty people.
Yeah, well, and then my mom she was open. My dad was also in sales. He was open. So I lived in this environment where I didn't have limits on conversation. I could include myself. Now, I wasn't always as outspoken as I am now. I was the typical shy kid and waiting to try to figure out, should I say something, should I not? But I think I was about 12 when my grandfather, he's retired now, and he's just ornery. And I just looked at him and I said, you like to argue, don't you, Grandpa? He grinned, he smiled at me, and he says, you're going to make a good businesswoman. And I have never forgotten that, because I'm not saying that I purposely always remember that, but there were times in my life where somebody's in front of me saying that this is the way that it is. And I would say, well, I don't see it that way. And I would just come off. And other people later would say, how did you have the guts to say that? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's just like, it was what was going on was illogical. It was not the way that it was done. And from my perspective, and I was open, but I felt that it was okay to engage. And so that's kind of how my life ran. My first job at 12, I got my wagon out and some Windex and rags and went down the street and went door to door. And I said, I'll charge you $2 for each of your outside windows and $1 for the inside. So sometimes people would just hire me to do the outsides where they had all the water spots on them and everything. And that's what I did at 12. And at 19, though, I'm a resident assistant in a large luxury complex just for women, because this is how old we are. So this is in the late 60s, early 70s, when you have segregated housing for male and female. And so every year I would lease these these apartments to parents and the daughters. There's a cafeteria. So the parents want to know that the daughters are going to be safe, that the building is locked, that they have, a nice place to study, all this stuff. The girls want to know what kind of fun is there. I mean, I'm in Santa Barbara. And so I found right away that you're not always just selling to one person. You're selling to whoever's there. So you're having actually two conversations. You're having an aside over here. You don't just focus on the one person when you've got a family. I learned how to family sell.
That's a good point, because I really do want to encapsulate the entire audience, and sales in the family and negotiation within the family is, how do we all win? Why are mom and dad putting that restriction on? And why is that a concern for you? Right. These kids, right, and so on. It's a conversation that's a beautiful awakening and opening, right, to have a better life.
Right. So I wasn't always the one with the answers, but I had this ability to kind of joke a little bit.
Yes.
So at 19, I didn't have restrictions on, you're an adult, you're this. Even as a kid, when my friends had introduced me to their parents as Mr. So-and-so, and I'd say, hi, Dad. And they got the biggest kick out of that. And I just realized that this formality thing that everybody puts out in the world is a defense mechanism to me. It's a respect mechanism. I get it when it needs to happen, yes, but also it's a defense mechanism. So I just always tested things. I'm a tester. and so
you and I are both thorns, to people poke here. Poke there.
Well, I have a velvet 2x4, but I don't break skin.
No. Velvet 2x4.
But the most fun thing I had, and this is where I just finally, you look back and you know all this. You don't know this while this is occurring.
No.
But we also had the Cal Poly was an engineering school an hour north, and they would come down every weekend looking for blind dates. So I got to sit on the counter in the lobby, and they'd come in. And so I basically am interviewing people, and they don't know it, but they're selling me. But I ask these good interview questions. So they're kind of selling me. And I say, okay, you guys go sit down at the other end of the lobby, and I'll call the girls. So then on the intercom, I'm calling the girls in the rooms and saying, they got these guys. And everybody's saying, what do they look like? But I've already scoped them out. And everybody always had a good time. I did really good matchmaking. And so even a couple of them got married. So, but I did that for 2 years. And so after that, when you get that microcosm of people and conversations and differences, you just don't mind talking to anybody. And, my boss for that time in my life, he was a lech. He liked to always be eyeing you up and down, and I could just keep it straight with him. And so I just got all these skills about how people thought they should be and shouldn't be. And I realized that I'm never going to be right for everybody. So I'm going to do it the best way I can.
And that is the bingo. That is the gift, of having our 7 decades or whatever we've got. It takes time. My changes started in the nastiness of the divorce, where I finally had burned out and going through a divorce, changing my work. And I went through hell for a few years, but that was that hell time that has broken everything open for me.
Right.
And so this stuff doesn't just come overnight, but the journey is worth it. And you and I have both walked the journey, and maybe we can shorten the journey for others.
Well, the thing is so let's go back to that original conversation about how we sell ourselves. First of all, people have people. There's a couple of things that are clamoring in my head here. One is there's a huge difference between being assertive and being aggressive.
Yes.
And too many people are running around in the world thinking that I don't want to be seen as pushy, which is aggressive, but they don't understand the distinction called assertive. And assertive just means you stand your ground, you don't have to raise your voice, you don't have to be derogatory to anyone, but it's like you know your value, so you stay there in your space to honor your value. You don't give it up. So we give up our assertiveness and our space when we allow someone else to give us a script to say these words, to do it this way, to do it that way. No, the challenge is for us to discover our way. How do we relate to people? Well, you already know how you relate to people. If you've gotten married, if you've dated, if you've run a committee, if you've volunteered. And what I used to find when I was in the corporate world is how everybody compartmentalized themselves. Well, I'm just doing a job. But then outside, they had this whole life. That whole life brought the value to the job, and the job brought the value to the life. So we isolate ourselves with silly thinking.
Yes. You know, all of this pigeonholing and labeling and so on. What do you do? Well, if you were at a networking, well, I sell life insurance. Or if you were at the church, well, I raise the children. And it was all labels, because who I am is the forever I am. I am a curious adventurer.
Oh, yes. And curiosity is a key part of selling. I mean, if you're not curious about people, don't try to sell something. Because it's curiosity about the person that you're trying to serve that is going to make you the sale every time. Now, here's another falsehood that's running around in the world. In the marketing world, everybody's doing a funnel. They want to do passive marketing. They want people to buy without having to have a conversation. Great. That's marketing. That's passive marketing. That's passive sales. But for those people who are still trying to be active, direct sellers, coaches, those types of things, you've got to put it over here in what is active selling. Well, active selling is building a relationship. You don't build a relationship if you're not curious about somebody. Nobody would go out and marry or date someone if you didn't know something about them. So some level of curiosity got you into that relationship. You want to carry it on now. And you don't want to go, like if somebody says, I have a cat, you don't want to go into telling your cat stories. You go, oh, that's really nice. I love cats. And then you let them go on. This is about getting a buyer created. We want to create a buyer. So what do we have to know about them? Well, we have to know what's on their agenda now that they want to solve. What is driving them to do it now as opposed to tomorrow or yesterday when they could have had it done? Or what is, so when we open a sales conversation, we want to know those things as quickly as we can, and we can do it. But a lot of people have this thought that the word conversation is going to be forever. No, I used to make, we can make sales in a relatively short amount of time. And part of your conversation is scripted, meaning how you talk about your product. But the piece that can't be scripted is that person, their need, their intrigue, what's driving them today, and then how you relate that product to them. So we might know, let's say we're selling one bottle of skincare, where I'm selling this timer. Well, I could probably have 50 features about this timer, right?
Right.
But this person doesn't need to know all 50. They need to know the two that are most important to them. Well, I don't know what those are if I haven't gotten to know them, if I don't have questions. And this is the part people are leaving out of every conversation. They're leaving the curiosity out because they feel they're going to lose control. And what I just want to tell everybody is none of us are ever in control.
Yes. And as you were talking, I mean, I love how it relates to sales, but a really tough thing is to go to a networking event. And what do you talk about? Well, if we can get over ourselves and just be curious about the other person, they're going to go tut. And you can, if there's any control, it's you weaving in and out of the conversation, but it's about them. And it's not about trying to meet 100 people because there's 200 people there. It's about moving along, and finding those 5 or 6 that you want to meet.
You know what I like. Now, I haven't done networking for a while, but man, have I got years of networking. And I always like this, where everybody assumes the world is reciprocal. Like, I'll do for you if you do for me, that kind of thing. And that's the way it should be, but it's not. And let's get real. And when people go to networking, a lot of it is splat. The person over here has been told, give you a 60-second thing, splat, move on. No. So what I like to do when I'm at a networking thing is I like to ask questions about them. And when they say, what do I do? I might throw something out, but I'll go back and I'll get into a question with them. And I could work a room of probably however many, 30 to 50 people, and not one of them would ever engage back with me the same way that I did with them. In other words, I decided that the best way to be in networking is to be designed for listening. So if I go in,
and a beautiful phrase, designed for listening, because we get so much more out of listening. That's not just listening long enough to, I want to say this. That's not listening.
So because I don't trust people just because of experience, not because I don't trust people, to really know what they're looking for. Because of all the years in sales, I know that a lot of times people come in with an idea of what they think they're looking for, and then it's really something else. And that's okay. I still may serve them because my product fits, or maybe not. But when you investigate, so I like to go to network, and I've never said it this way. I like to go to networking, and I like to question and query. And then what will happen is 5 or 6 people will stick out for me, in which I can have a relationship with them. So I will pursue that with them. And then I'll remember to say, when we were talking, you mentioned this, this, and this. Are you open to the next conversation? Then I had my chance. So I think networking's taught all wrong. Mm-hmm. And I haven't decided to go out and be the one scorching the earth and saying, here's how to do it, because it's like, that's not who I am. But if somebody's wanting to listen one-on-one, and they've got and it takes strength to listen. It takes a good sense of self. Yes. Because a lot of networking in that 60-second, this is, I think, people trying to prove themselves. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to prove my worth in 60 seconds.
And it's all the imposter syndrome, because at the end of the day, we all live with this imposter where we think they're going to find out who we really are. Well, you and I have finally arrived at, this is us, take us or leave us, and it's such a treasure to find that peace and be okay with it. Yeah. And that is the difference, because I know when I'm working with people around their communication, their words and so on, but you're not connecting with me. What's going on inside? So it all comes back to knowing yourself. So that inner work has to be done if you're ever going to be truly successful, because you could be successful in sales with the pushing or just the way you do sales. Be happy. Are you going to be happy? Because you also have to be happy inside.
Yeah. My best moment of selling was, well, first of all, when I was doing the thing in college, I don't even think I saw it as sales. No. I'm leasing, right? And I'm enjoying people because that's how I grew up. And then, I wasn't waiting for a paycheck because I was getting room and board. So it was all fine. Everything was copacetic. But listening, I found, was much more comfortable. So I had watched also some of my nonverbal relatives sit back, but still be the life of the party sometimes, because they were listening to everybody. And then all of a sudden they'd throw out something that was just like a zinger, and everybody'd laugh. And this person had been quiet for a high percentage of the time. And a lot of coaching, because I had to talk. I could always talk, and I still can. But I love the listening. I find myself now, if I'm in a big group of people, I'll listen longer than probably anybody there, because I pick up good stuff about people, about what's important, what the trends are. And it was such a relief because I was in an intense industry. I was in property management for
Mhm.
20 years. And, you have to have an answer every second.
Yes.
Plumbing leak, fire, this emergency, this person arguing with that person next door. I mean, I was a resolutions person, so I had
And
to have it.
that is living in the practical world.
Yeah.
So we have the practical world and the strategizing
Yeah.
that we're bringing together in this whole process of just being ourselves.
But when I left that, I was doing some transformative work, and I got to be just quiet sometimes, and that felt good.
Mhm.
So I finally learned the balance. I think I was about 40 when I learned the balance.
Bingo.
And then that was when my questioning and listening skills started really improving, because I was out of an environment where I was the end of the line. When you're the end of the line, you don't get to sometimes take that time, or you do. It's my choice to take the time. But my biggest compliment nowadays is when people say you're a good listener.
Right. And we shortchange it. And the other thing that you just brought up that I think is really critical as well is that you were 40 when you started to realize that I was 35, 40, going through my hell and realizing that I've got to bring balance into my life, because I'm just not happy camper. I can be successful. Everybody could look at either one of us and say, wow, you're successful. Look at the grin on your face. You're well groomed. You're comfortable. You're assertive. And we have such presence,
right,
because of what we've gone through. And that's the assertiveness, the knowing who we are. But it's interesting that for you and I both, and for others when I'm talking to them, it's that 35-40 age bracket. And actually, when I look at who I'm approaching within my own communication training, is really from that 35 to 60 that really are ready. I can work with anybody.
Right.
But those are the ones that are ready to say, there's got to be more. And
there is something to this midlife, and I'm going to call it a transition. I don't like the word crisis, because we all mature. And so I was 38 when I sold my business. I worked 80 hours a week. I had 50 employees. I knew my business. I knew it in and out. And it was just one day I went, but what am I doing for myself?
Right.
And I didn't have a family and didn't know if I wanted one, but I hadn't given myself any time. And so now, when you get to that point and you go over everything and you take the time off, I took a year off, spent up all my money, started over, but it was fine. And every life experience I've had has only added to the value. And so we're seasoned. And people say, well, what does that mean? It just means we've weathered a lot of storms and we're still here. And so when people want something, they want some experience, not out of a book, then they have us as resources. Right. And I figure that's what I have now and I've always loved being a mentor, meaning just bring a pragmatic point of view to something. When something's highly emotional, let's take it out of there and let's ground it.
Yes.
So, what's fascinating is I got to do some facilitation work years ago with a company, and we reformatted their whole flow, dropped employee absences, all sorts of things. But I got to do facilitation, which is listening and coming up with ideas and then tossing them back to the group, and then they had to recraft them and recreate them. And that was really exciting. And so I like to facilitate when somebody's hard and fast on something. I say, is that the only way it can be? Mm-hmm. What are the other options? I like the reframing of things for people. So in that facilitation process, a lot of people were always focused on, got to get done, rubber to the road. And then the others were always in the clouds. Mm-hmm. And when you're facilitating an individual or a group, the objective is to have both. You got the rubber has to hit the road, and you always have to stay in the clouds. I mean, that's why companies keep changing. That's why we have people like Musk and everybody else is they got their feet on the ground, but they have their head in the clouds.
And when we're saying a head in the clouds, for me, it's the use of our imagination. When we were born and those first few years as little children, we created all kinds of games and all kinds of imaginations. I mean, I
Yeah.
would stand on the big rock and sing my heart out to the world,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they were applauding, and the cars were driving by and honking their horn. This
I
thing
know.
up on the rock. That's what it really is. When we can capture that, go back to that little child and allow our imagination to let us. So yes, we have to look after this practical world.
Yeah.
But we have to play out there to create that and bring it to us. And that's what you and I have both done. Since
Right.
we were 35 and 40, we've known there's a bigger world there. There's something more for us. And we've quit throwing the labels on and just started living.
Right.
And it's taken time. So
You know,
you
yeah.
happen to be in sales. I happen to be in communication. Somebody else happens to be a plumber. So we still bring our skills to the world.
Right.
But we live in a happy space.
Yeah. And something you just said triggered me. When we're out here trying to define ourselves in this online marketing world and sales, we're looking at a lot of examples of how people are doing it, but we're forgetting to ask the question, how would I do it?
Mm-hmm.
Not like what they're doing is wrong,
No.
not like what they're doing is bad, but how would I do this? Meaning, do I want to do everything they do or part of it? Would I amend something because it's going to fit my personality or my tone better? And then the other thought that I had was there's too much conversation. There's this undertone always that there is only one right way to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And what everybody is going to be healthier for, mentally healthy and physically healthy, is what is right for me. So, it's like when somebody comes, would I like to lose some weight? Sure. But when somebody comes to me with a diet solution, I'm not even looking, because I have so fine-tuned my food sources that there is not one product on the market that's a weight loss shake thing that I would consume, because there's 2 to 3 things in there that I know my body no longer tolerates. And so when people are that fine-tuned, you want to meet other people who are that fine-tuned to understand that if you say no, you really mean no.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't have any trouble saying no, and I get it, but I realize a lot of people are taught this silly thing called go for more no's. Go for more understanding. If you get that first no, then you say something simple like say more.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, I, the seller, want to learn from you what thoughts you have around this. I don't want to leave this sales conversation thinking that, oh, another one down the drain, another one down the drain. It's like, whoa, stop. There may have been one thing you said that they took incorrectly. So now you have time to adjust that. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me come back and let me be more clear. They may get a no because, well, so-and-so and so-and-so had tried that and it didn't work for them. Tell me more.
I think that's what they're talking about when they say go for another no. Some people take it, oh, well, on to the next person. But going for the no means not to run away, but to
But nobody qualifies that.
Get curious.
See, the top sellers know that, but nobody qualifies that.
Right.
And so this is where curiosity has to stay in. In other words, and people love to be helpful. You can always say, well, would you help me out? If this product is not for you, could you tell me, was there any information that I left out here that could have been valuable to you making a choice? Or was there, do you have anybody else that might be interested in this? See, we are so ready to be rejected in this world that we don't take the time to say, I wonder what else I could have done. Wonder what else is option. I wonder if this person would play with me now and sort of just help me out.
I love the wording that you put in there, because the book I've been working with my group on Mondays and on my own is The Game of Life and How to Play It. And indeed, as Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage and each of us are actors. I don't know if that's the exact words, but it's so true. Life is a game. And when we step into that curious space of playing the game, not sitting on the bleachers saying, you threw that wrong, you did that, like, get over yourself, get in and play the game, whatever
Right.
it is in there. And that's where life is happening and where we open our minds. And with that opening of our minds, staying curious moves us along. I mean,
Well,
even you and I, when we were talking before we got into the recording, it doesn't matter what decade we're in, we're still curious and so many new things to learn. And a little turn of a phrase, and oh, okay, open up,
Yeah.
people, open up. It's beautiful.
Well, yeah. And so I always get this question with all the online marketing that's going on, and they're focusing on everybody having their avatar and who's your audience. My audience is across the spectrum. It's people who recognize that there's something they're doing that is limiting themselves and they want to make sales. So that's where I come in. And I just find that when people are running around and saying, well, this is the way it should be done, or else their team leaders are saying this is the way it should be done, they're trying to help people get out of their fear zone. But the thing is you don't get out of your fear zone unless you tell people it's acceptable to make a mistake. Always go back to your customer. Customers want to be helpful. So as long as you weren't rude to them, you can always go back and say, I'm really struggling here doing my job, doing this new thing. I'd love any input you have. Was there anything I did today that was useful to you or helpful to you or that you liked about what I delivered? Use it as an educational experience. And that takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of chutzpah. And most of us don't do it. And there's even times when I first learned that, it was like, oh God, that's so awkward. But I got to doing it. Like, well, how could I have done better for you? And people are really helpful. And I learned from that. So I didn't learn from just the school of hard knocks. I learned from the school of asking.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's taught either. So which is why I always run a 3-day boot camp for my people to show them the 3 principles that top sellers don't share. And I'll always do a VIP session afterwards in which I want people to ask questions because we can have conversations like this in those questions. And then I do an intensive because selling is a mindset as well as a skill. And the mindset is a skill, but I don't just do mindset. It's like it's around communication with others. And I see a lot of people taking these NLP classes. And I think what I do is NLP, but I've never been trained. And why? Because I've observed people since I was a child. And I watch behaviors and I go, what does that mean? What does that mean? Yeah. And I try not to make an assumption about it. Now, obviously, if someone's standing there with a gun in my face, I'm going to make an assumption about that behavior. But in general, I'm not the best at this, but if somebody's like in a weird space, they're argumentative, they're just being rude. My first question is, wonder what else has gone on in their day. And I'm not really good at that, but I do bite my tongue until I get myself there. And I can say, what's going on. And I had that happen the other day. I've sent out some messages inviting people to my class next week. And this woman said, well, what makes you assume I need this? I went back and I read my message and it's like, there's no assumption in this message. It's an offer. And I said, well, assuming is something that I've worked really hard at not doing. I apologize if I did that. So it's like, I'm not going to take offense.
Yep.
And she says, but you said this. And I went, well, those words have no assumption attached to them. In my head, I'm saying this.
Yes.
And as I went, thank you again, disconnected, deleted the message, unfriended, and went, this is going nowhere. This is not worthy of her time or my time. I'm going to save her. And I'm just going to gracefully bow out because it wasn't a winnable conversation. No, and I don't want to win conversations.
That's where I say, love them, bless them, and let them go.
But so there are a lot of sensitivities out there in the world nowadays. And I know people are gun shy of some of those things, but But if you're an honest communicator with yourself, you'll be an honest communicator with the world.
Yes.
And so just pull out your essence. And if somebody told you to say it this way, question if those words really work for you. See, I think I was blessed. I don't memorize. I can't memorize. I haven't memorized. I argued with my teachers in school when they wanted me to memorize a poem. I said, I don't memorize. I'm an extemporaneous speaker. I'm extremely creative and strategic. If you take my strengths, I'm number 1 creative, number 2 strategic. I'm always making it up. I can't even stop it from firing. I can do it. I can stop it from firing.
I love that way of putting it because.
But it's so sometimes my first impression, I need to watch that I don't always throw out my first impression because I want to check some things out. But in my youth, oh man, did I blurt? I know how to blurt, but it saved me a few times too.
Yes.
Just that thinking, because I had
it's that beautiful balancing and coming back. I'm just watching our time, Carla.
Yeah.
Marla Koupal. So I'm turning my letters around there, Marla. But this has been just such a rich conversation. I just love it. I'm just going to check back over here. I think what I'm going to wind this up with, I say that the truth for all of us is that we are all selling and every breath we take. Now, how can that be? At the end of the day, all we have is ourselves. That's it. We have ourselves. You and I, and you in Zoomland, that's it. The only thing we have to sell is ourselves. And the first tough sale is to know ourselves intimately inside, so that being assertive is just who we truly are. Mm-hmm. And until we reach that, we struggle. What are your final words today, Marla?
If you want to sell something, get out of the mindset of have to. The only time I made the best sales in my life, and I've made some good sales, is I got out of the have to. And anytime I found that I had a thought that ran through my head that said, this won't work, or, oh, they're not ready, or whatever, I had to quiet that voice. So whoever your inner voice is, if it's not your best coach, find a way to help it be quiet and ask it. Just ask its permission to allow you to explore people, to explore the situation, and to not have the right answer. We actually have a voice inside of us that says, you must have the right answer. Mm-hmm. And I want you to quiet that voice. And I want you to grow the voice inside you that says, I don't know the right answers, but I'm going to go for it anyway.
Thank you, Marla. That's beautiful closing for today. And perhaps we'll meet again here in Zoomland, because I think we have more good stuff to share.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's Marla, Scrappy Marla. I like that, Scrappy Marla, because I like us at our age being scrappy.
Oh, yes.
Still here. And it's Coach Sandra, Compassionate Queen of Straight Talk. The two straight talkers scrapping away here. Thank you so much, Marla. And for you in Zoomland, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.